Hello and welcome back to Koala Moon, children's bedtime stories and meditations designed to make bedtime a dream. This is The Clumsy Duckling and the Bird Ballet by Alicia Ainsley. There once was a little duckling called Quackers. Quackers had bright yellow fuzzy fur all over her body that would one day turn brown and transform into feathers. She had a sweet pink beak, a pair of beady black eyes, and 2 orange flappy webbed flippers for feet. Quackers lived on a lake in Sleepy Forest with her parents and 6 duckling brothers and sisters. Quackers might only have been a young duck of 15 days old, but she already knew what she wanted to be when she grew up. Quackers wanted to be a ballerina in the Royal Bird Ballet. Only the finest feathered dancers made it into the Royal Bird Ballet, and they all started by attending classes from a young age to perfect their pirouettes, pliés, and pas de deux. So when Quackers was old enough, she started her first class. That afternoon, her mother picked her up from school and took her to the dance studio, where Quackers excitedly slipped into her tutu and ballet slippers in the waiting room. There were a number of other young birds waiting for class to begin, including Quackers' friend from school, Beaky the blackbird. It seemed to be that all the other young birds had been coming to class for a while, and they stretched their wings and feet as they waited patiently to be let into the classroom. Quackers felt a little bit like a duck out of water, but she was eager to get started and begin learning. The door to the dance studio finally opened, and the young birds said goodbye to their parents as they shuffled inside the classroom. Quackers' mother gave her a kiss on the top of her head and whispered, "Have fun, my sweet duckling." Then Quackers followed the other students inside. The studio was massive, with a yellow wooden floor and tall, shiny mirrors lining the walls all the way around the room. Ballet bars were set alongside the mirrors, and gentle, tinkling piano music played through the music speakers as the young birds gathered for class. Quackers' beak hung open with wonder as she looked around. It was just like she had imagined it would be. "Good afternoon, everyone," a soft French-accented voice announced. All the students stopped still and paid attention as a tall, beautiful white swan walked soundlessly across the front of the room. Quackers thought that the magnificent bird looked familiar, but she couldn't put her wing on it. The swan continued, "We have a new student joining our class today. Everybody say hello to Quackers." Every little bird's head swiftly turned to stare at Quackers, and she blushed as she shyly waved her wing. "Welcome to ballet," the swan smiled. "I'm your teacher, Miss Siggy Swan." Quackers gasped as she realized where she recognized her teacher from. Siggy Swan had once been a prima ballerina for the Royal Bird Ballet, and Quackers had seen several videos of her performing in shows like The Duck Quacker, Sleeping Budgie, and, of course, Swan Lake. Quackers had heard lots about Miss Siggy Swan's captivating dancing and graceful demeanour. She was rumoured to be one of the best bird dancers around. The young duckling was so excited to be taught by a ballet legend. Quackers gawped at Miss Siggy Swan with admiration as she spoke to her. Miss Siggy asked if this was Quackers' first time attending a ballet class, and Quackers nodded her head. Miss Siggy assured her that she would soon pick up the moves, but if Quackers had any questions or needed anything explaining further, then all she had to do was raise her wing to ask. Then Miss Siggy clapped her wings twice, and everyone in class found a space in the studio and froze in a starting position. Quackers copied what everyone else was doing by standing with her spindly little legs together, touching her heels and turning out her feet to the sides. A fuzzy black moorhen with enormous feet whispered to Quackers that this position was called first position, and they always started class in this way. Quackers was appreciative for the moorhen's help. She would need a lot while she caught up to speed. A slow piano melody began to play over the studio speakers, and Miss Siggy called out instructions to guide the students in a ballet warm-up. At first, Quackers had no idea what any of the words meant that her teacher was calling out, and so she simply copied what everyone else was doing. However, as the music went on, Quackers started to recognize the words and needed to watch her fellow classmates less and less. By the end of the warm-up, Quackers understood what first and second position were, knew that a plie was a bend of the knees, and could just about wave her wing in the right direction as her feet moved and her knees bent. The class went on, and Quackers learnt several different ballet moves, from spinning pirouettes to big jumps called grands jetés. Every new move the young duckling learnt was thrilling, and Quackers could almost imagine herself performing on the big stage at the Royal Bird Ballet already. With her first class under her feathers, Quackers returned home that evening gushing to her family about how wonderful ballet had been, what a lovely teacher Miss Siggy was, and expressing how she couldn't wait to attend class again next week. The next week came around fast, and so did ballet. This week, class was a little bit harder for Quackers. There were even more moves to learn, plus a third and fourth position to get her head and her feet around. Quackers needed a bit more help with picking up the moves as they became more advanced. Quackers had originally thought that ballet would be easy to learn, but actually, it was turning out to be quite tricky. After the third time of having to ask Miss Siggy for extra help, Quackers was starting to feel a little deflated. Why was nobody else struggling to pick up the moves as much as she was? Miss Siggy could sense that Quackers was being a bit hard on herself, and she reassured Quackers that she was doing very well for a beginner. Quackers sighed and replied, "Is it supposed to be this hard? All the ballerinas I have watched make it look easy. Maybe I'm not meant to be a ballet dancer after all." But Miss Siggy reassured Quackers that she was only on her second lesson. She couldn't expect to be a great ballet dancer after such a short time. The kind teacher explained to Quackers, "We ballerinas make it look easy, but that is only because we have worked very, very hard for many years to make it feel easy." Motivated by her teacher's words, Quackers persevered as best as she could for the rest of the lesson, and by the end she had a better handle on her third and fourth positions. Before bed that night, Quackers watched more videos of prima ballerinas performing magnificent dance solos. They all floated around the stage so effortlessly, and Quackers wondered how many ballet lessons they had to attend to become as spectacular as they were. During Quackers' third lesson, Miss Siggy announced that all students would be taking their first ballet exam at the end of the term. They would perform 2 short dances and demonstrate a variety of different ballet positions for the examiners, who would watch. Then the students would each be graded and given a certificate. All the students were excited by the prospect of doing a ballet exam, especially Quackers. She knew that if she did lots of exams and worked her way up to the top level, she could maybe, one day, perform with the Royal Bird Ballet just like Miss Siggy once did. With this new goal in sight, the students started learning 2 dance routines to prepare for their exam. One routine was slow and graceful, full of lots of balancing positions and floaty wings. Meanwhile, the other was a little bit faster, packed with fancy footwork and multiple jumps. Miss Siggy was a good teacher, and the students picked up and practiced the exam pieces well. All except for Quackers. Quackers was finding it rather hard to keep up. Miss Siggy would demonstrate each ballet move at the front of the class, and then all the students would have a go at copying. Some little birds got it right the first time. Some took a few attempts, but eventually got the hang of it, and a couple of them struggled for a bit longer. Quackers was one of the students who couldn't help getting her feet in a tangle each time she tried to perform a new move. Ballet didn't feel like it was coming naturally to Quackers, and she couldn't help comparing her struggles with the students who seemed to be getting it right the first time. But Quackers pushed on. Miss Siggy directed the students to perform a graceful ensemble, which was a jump in the air, springing off one leg, joining the legs together in midair, and then landing on 2 feet. Quackers attempted to perform an ensemble, just as Miss Siggy had demonstrated. But as she swept her webbed foot up and lifted off the floor, she swept a little too hard and threw herself backwards onto the ground in a feathery heap. Quackers looked up at the ceiling and watched as a few classmates' faces came into view as they checked she was okay. "Are you all right, Quackers?" a fuzzy yellow and brown gosling called Brent asked meekly. Quackers blushed and got back up on her feet again quickly. Yes, I'm fine," she giggled with embarrassment. "The floor is a little slippy, that's all." Quackers tried to join in with class again, but it wasn't the only time she slipped up that day. For their graceful, slow exam dance, Miss Siggy had the students all congregate in a line to perform a single pirouette, one by one, like a domino effect down the line. Starting at the far end, an elegant dove named Diamond performed a perfect pirouette, turning on the spot on one leg and landing gracefully on 2 feet in the same spot. One by one, each student performed their pirouette, landing them expertly. But when it got to Quackers, things took a rocky turn. Quackers prepared for her turn and hopped up onto her tiptoes on one webbed foot. But as she spun her body around, she moved too fast and turned the wrong way. Quackers' wings flew out to the sides and she lost her balance, wobbling and falling over flat on her beak, knocking into the student on her right as she tumbled. Just like a set of dominoes, The young birds standing in the line all fell down to the floor as they knocked into each other, one after the other. It wasn't quite the domino effect Miss Siggy had been hoping for. Miss Siggy stared at her students with surprise, and then ruffled her feathers and sighed. "Why don't we try that again?" she purred softly with a slight giggle. The young birds all got up and trudged back into their starting positions, and Quackers bowed her head with embarrassment. It had been going quite well until she tripped over. All of a sudden, she felt a nudge of her wing, and she looked to her side to see her friend from school, Beaky the Blackbird, smiling at her. "Don't worry about it, Quackers," Beaky whispered. "We all trip and stumble sometimes. What's important is that we try again." Quackers tried to muster up a smile and prepared to have another shot at the routine. The music played once more, and the class performed the choreographed moves, but still, Quackers couldn't get the steps right and wobbled in and out of her pirouette like jelly on a plate. She just couldn't find her balance. At the end of class, Quackers and the other students headed out of the studio towards the waiting room where their parents were. Quackers was so disappointed in herself, and she sulked as she headed towards the door. Noticing that something was troubling her, Beaky placed her wing across Quackers's back. "I think I'm going to quit," Quackers sniffed. "I'll never be in the Royal Bird Ballet. I'm far too clumsy." "Don't give up, Quackers," implored Beaky. "I found it hard when I first started ballet too, but it has got easier with time." Overhearing their conversation, Diamond the Dove chirped in. "Yes, and you love ballet. Don't give up on something you love just because you've had a bad class. Next time will be different." Quackers smiled unconvincingly and rushed out of the dance studio into the waiting room. It was nice of Beaky and Diamond to say, but they didn't understand how hard it was. They appeared to find ballet easy, so they could never understand. Quackers' mother greeted her with a big grin and open wings. "There's my little ballerina," she beamed. "How was class today?" Quackers kicked off her ballet slippers and fell into her mother's wings for a hug. She told her that she had an awful lesson and she wanted to quit ballet. Quackers' mother was shocked. Her little duckling loved ballet. It was all she ever talked about. Why was she having a sudden change of heart? She decided to get to the bottom of what was really going on. As they walked home to the lake, Quackers told her mother all about her embarrassing falls, her inability to get her head around the steps, and how she felt inferior next to all her classmates. Her friend Beaky was so much better at ballet than she was. Quackers felt she would never be as good as the other dancing birds. Her mother nodded her head in acknowledgement as she listened. Then she eventually spoke. "How long has your friend Beaky been attending ballet class?" she asked Quackers. Quackers replied, I'm not sure, but longer than I have." Her mother responded, "Okay, then How can you expect to be as good as Beaky when Beaky has had more practice than you? Quackers didn't know what to say. She supposed her mother was right. Beaky had attended many more ballet classes than she had. Quackers recalled what Miss Siggy said last week in class. Ballerinas make it look easy because they have worked very hard for many years to make it feel easy. Maybe Quackers was being too hard on herself. Her mother suggested, "Why don't I help you practice at home? You can show me and your brothers and sisters your moves to gain your confidence performing in front of other birds. The more you practice, the better you'll become." Quackers thought that was a great idea. She needed to catch up with her classmates, and by practicing at home, it would be like having lots of extra dance lessons. Quackers smiled and nuzzled against her mother's wing. She could always rely on her to help her feel better. Her mother whispered in her ear, "Remember, nothing worth having is ever easy. You've got to work to achieve your dreams." Quackers decided to do just as her mother suggested. She decided to start rehearsing regularly at home. She demonstrated to her brothers and sisters all the different ballet positions on the edge of the lake, and they counted for her while she rehearsed her footwork. She woke up every morning and stretched her wings and practiced walking on her tiptoes whenever the family went down to the river. Quackers started becoming so light on her feet that her mother even had to keep regularly checking over her shoulder to ensure that Quackers was following the line of ducklings. The more Quackers practiced at home, the quicker she started to see progress. Her wings were more graceful, her pliés bent down deeper, and her footwork was getting swifter and more precise. And it wasn't just at home that Quackers could see the change. She could see it in ballet class too. The once rather clumsy duckling was now tripping over less, getting frustrated less, and feeling more confident. Miss Siggy and the other young birds noticed too. One day, after a particularly successful run of their dance exam pieces, Miss Siggy sashayed her way over to Quackers. "Quackers," she said, "I have noticed a great improvement in you recently. I'm very impressed with your progress." Quackers smiled with pride. She had been working very hard at home, and it was paying off. Their dance exam was just around the corner now, and everyone was starting to get a little nervous, so Quackers decided to double her practice at home. Every waking moment when she wasn't at school or swimming on the lake with her family, Quackers rehearsed the ballet routines. Every time she did them, they felt a little easier within her body. And after some time, she felt like she could perform the routines in her sleep. In fact, she did perform the routines in her sleep quite often. Quackers would dream each night of performing on the Royal Bird Ballet stage next to Miss Siggy Swan. When she took her final curtsy after a dazzling performance, the audience would erupt with rapturous applause, and roses of appreciation would be flung onto the stage at her feet. Quackers felt on top of the world in her imagination, and when she woke, she felt even more determined to reach for her dream. The day of the ballet exam came around, and Quackers' body was buzzing with anticipation. She waited outside the dance studio with her fellow students as the examiners got themselves ready inside. Quacker's mother had to put a little pink bow in her fuzzy yellow hair today to wish her good luck, and as she stood outside the room in her shiny pink tutu and well-worn ballet slippers, she felt like a proper ballerina for the first time. Miss Siggy eventually opened up the studio door, and the students all filed inside quietly, barely making a sound as they tiptoed across the wooden studio floor. They all stood in first position and waited for the music to begin. As the soft, slow piano music began to play, Quackers and the other students moved through their graceful routine delicately. Quackers fought through her nerves and focused on the moves. It was harder performing the routine with the examiners watching. Quackers could feel her legs wobbling more in her one-legged arabesque, and for a moment she worried that she might fall over. However, she managed to hold herself together and finished the routine successfully. Next, it was time for their second, slightly quicker routine. Quackers bent her knees in preparation and jumped up into the air, pointing her webbed toes as much as she could as the plonky piano played. She counted in her head, keeping in time to the music, and fixed a smile on her beak the whole time. Miss Siggy always said that when you smile, you can trick your brain into feeling less nervous. And as Quackers tried it now, she realized that she was right. Quackers felt much better with a smile on her beak. When it was time for her grand jeté, Quackers leapt into the air with excellent acceleration, but stumbled a little as she landed. She hoped that nobody had noticed, but she was sure that the examiners must have seen her stumble. As the music finished, Quackers kept smiling and tried to trick her brain into forgetting that she fell, but she couldn't help feeling disappointed that the routine hadn't gone perfectly after all the practice she'd put in. The examiners thanked the students for their time, and the young birds all filed out of the studio to wait outside while the examiners added up their grades. Quackers chatted to her friend Beaky and her new ballet friend Diamond as they waited patiently in the waiting room. "How do you think the exam went, Quackers?" Beaky asked curiously. Quackers replied, "I'm not sure. I messed up the landing of my grand jeté and wobbled in my arabesque, but otherwise I think I did all right." Diamond Dove glanced over at the studio door and whispered, "Well, I think we are about to find out." Miss Siggy opened the door and stepped outside with a wing full of certificates. She was smiling from feather to feather as she addressed the class. "Bravo, everyone! You all did wonderful and should be very proud of yourselves. Here are your individual marks and certificates. Now, remember, this is only your first ever ballet exam, so don't be too hard on yourselves if you didn't get the grade you wanted. You were all magnifique today." Miss Siggy handed out everyone's certificates, and the young birds all read them eagerly. When Quackers' certificate landed in her wings, she skimmed the writing to find her grade. She had got a 90% mark. She couldn't believe it. Even with her wobble and stumble, she still got a fantastic grade. I got 87%, Beaky announced proudly. What mark did you get, Quackers? Quackers looked up from her certificate and grinned as she declared, I got 90%. Beaky and Diamond were amazed at Quackers' excellent result and congratulated her on doing so well. Quackers glanced at Miss Siggy, who was watching her, smiling proudly too. Quackers couldn't wait to get home and share her success with her family. To Quackers' amazement, as she spoke to more of her classmates, she discovered that she had got one of the highest marks in the whole class. For a little duckling who was new to ballet, she had done rather brilliantly. Maybe Quackers' dream of dancing in the Royal Bird Ballet wasn't such a crazy dream after all. If she kept persevering, working hard, and believing in herself, maybe this clumsy duckling could be destined to be a prima ballerina after all. We're drifting towards dreams now, the happiest, loveliest dreams you've ever dreamt. We're calm and cozy. Your breathing is relaxed and you can feel that lovely weight of the blanket keeping you safe and warm. Aren't you comfy? You are so warm and cozy, so sleepy. As you drift into dreams, count all the things you're grateful for. Let yourself fill up with all of the little moments that made you smile today. See the faces of the people that made you laugh. Think of the things that challenged you. Think of the things you learned and the practice that meant you'll be a little bit better tomorrow than you were today. Think about how warm and cozy and sleepy you are here in your bed. What a day you had. Wonderful things lie ahead for you too. You will have wonderful adventures tomorrow and the next day and the one after that. The whole world is waiting for you. But there's no rush. There's nothing more to do today. All that's left for today is rest, deep, cozy sleep. The most beautiful of dreams are waiting for you now. That's why you're drifting off, gently, into dreamland. So keep breathing slowly. Let yourself get toasty warm. Let your eyelids stay heavy. And know that you are safe. Remember that you are smart. You are brave. You are kind. And you are loved. Think it to yourself. I am smart. I am brave. I am kind. I am loved. You are a dream. When tomorrow comes, you'll face it with a smile, because you are smart, brave, kind and loved. Because you are you. Uniquely, wonderfully you. What kind of dream are you drifting towards tonight? You can dream however you want, because your imagination is as wide as the universe. What will you find in tonight's dream? Maybe you'll see your favourite characters. Is that Hector and Sunny over there? Maybe you'll visit the moon, where there's mice eating cheese in the craters. Maybe you'll walk through Sleepy Forest, where Coco the koala is strumming his pink ukulele on the banks of Sleepy River. Let your imagination take you away. Your dreams are all yours, and you deserve the sweetest dreams of all, because you are brave, you are kind, and you are loved. You are brave, you are kind, and you are loved, and you are wonderfully, uniquely you. You are a dream, and it's time to sleep, tucked up in your bed. Breathe slowly and melt into your bed. Isn't it warm and soft and cozy? It's time to rest. Take deep breaths in and out and let yourself relax as you say goodbye to the day. Let your body get even heavier. Let your whole body go floppy. Drift deeper into sleep with every breath and say goodnight. Remember, tomorrow will be a good day because you have a big heart. You are a good friend. You believe in yourself. You know there's nothing better to be than yourself. It's okay to get things wrong. It's okay to ask for help. You can do whatever you set your mind to. Be proud to be different. Be proud of your achievements. Be proud of yourself. You are a good learner. You are a good listener. You are a good example to others. You are valued. You are loved. You are sleepy. So drift off now, little one. Let the dreams take over. As you sleep, let your dreams take you to magical lands and faraway places. Remember, there's no room for worries in your dreams, just magic. It's a magic place where anything can happen, anything you want. It's a place of positivity and light. Let positivity soak into you and fill you up. Imagine it as a golden light traveling from the tips of your toes to the top of your head. Imagine that wherever the light touches you fills with happiness. Imagine that the light makes you feel calm. You're wrapped in a warm, cozy glow within your soft, toasty blanket. Isn't that nice? You are safe, tucked up tight. So sleep soundly all through the night. Sweet dreams, little one. I'll see you soon.